Good evening and good morning. This is quite late. This is Hannah Klein, and welcome to my podcast, Hannah Klein's Time. Before starting my podcast, please visit my homepage and watch commercials. Also, please sign up for the free newsletter and get my latest updates. But anyway, I would like to move on to today's guest. Well, I had a very, very meaningful conversation. He gave a lot of opinions and views, which are very constructive and very positive, I guess. In many ways, and in good in many ways, I have to say. Today's guest's name is Menachem Levine, Rabbi Menachem Levine. I'm sorry. Well, he is the CEO of a Jewish school in the Midwest right now. But anyway, please welcome Rabbi Levine. Hey, so good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Rabbi. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thank God.
That's great. So so you are in the Midwest, obviously.
That's correct.
And how's the weather?
It's funny. I grew up in Miami Beach, Florida, and I was a rabbi. I lived in New York and in New Jersey. But I was a rabbi prior to moving to Chicago in the Midwest for 13 years in Silicon Valley in San Jose, which is California. So Chicago is the first time really living in the Midwest, and definitely has the coldest weather of all of the. It's colder over here, albeit end of April. We're getting a mix of warmth some days, a little bit chillier the other days. But I didn't move here for the weather. It's a beautiful Jewish community, a very nice community in general. So the weather is not the attraction. It does have 3 months of nice warmth in the summer. Other 8 to 9 months, it's less than perfect.
I'm sorry. But I was if you could briefly, well, I would like to ask you more about, your, activities on Torah later. But would you explain yourself, like your academic background and so forth? Just explain to me a little bit.
How I grew up, my education, or which part would you like?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I was born in New York. I moved my parents moved to Miami, South Florida. I was 2 years old, and basically was educated there. I learned in yeshivas for many years in New York, in New Jersey. Lakewood, New Jersey has the largest yeshiva in America, approximately 8,500 students. I mean, Lakewood as a city, let's say about 85,000 very Orthodox Jews out of about 110,000 people over there. So it's a very large Jewish area in New Jersey. I studied in Jerusalem for several years. And then I had previously I had an undergrad degree. I won the History Award for Yeshiva University in New York when I was an undergrad. And then after Lakewood, I went to University of Pennsylvania Law School, which is an Ivy League law school in Philadelphia. And having taken rabbinical ordination, I went straight from law school, took the bar, passed the bar, and became a rabbi in California for 13 years in a bunch of tech employees. People work for Google and Cisco and Intel. Actually, there are a lot of Asians who work in Silicon Valley, San Jose as well. South Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, Indians. And after spending 13 great years in California, I became the CEO of the largest Jewish school in the Midwest. and really probably one of the largest elementary schools outside of New York, New Jersey, with Jewish schools in general.
Wow. That's great.
No, I
have,
write, I
have
write,
great, academic background. I read about you, of course, and you just wanted, to explain from yourself. But,
and I,
at the same time, you have a great career, I think.
yeah, and I'm able to do interviews like yourself, people are doing good work. I write a lot for a lot of different periodicals, from San Jose Mercury News to Dallas Morning Times to many of the Jewish periodicals like the Jerusalem Post, Israel National News, H.com, Hamodia, and I lecture a lot as well. So it's a lot of fun.
See, yeah, I know of some people from Jerusalem too. So, you know,
So it seems you.
I really love, yeah, Israeli people and, but I appreciate you for, being on my podcast again. It's an honor for me. And, one thing that, I really appreciate, you for appearing is that, you mentioned that you would like, you're willing to share your family history.
Huh,
And, I mean, some people do mind, just sharing family history because of the tragedy. But, I really appreciate it for doing that. And so, like, would you explain if you could?
sure. Oh, it's actually I think the timing is appropriate because it's really 80 years since
Hmm.
World War II ended, like beginning
Yes.
of, well, not with Japan, that'd be a few months later. Victory in Europe Day for the world was in
Yes.
May 1945. And in May 1945, that's not only when World War II ended in Europe, but that's when the Holocaust ended. And all four of my grandparents
Mhm.
were from Poland. They were Holocaust survivors. It's very interesting. As many people know, there were 6 million murders in the Holocaust. Poland was the first victim
Mhm.
of Nazi Germany. World War II starts with the Nazi invasion of Poland,
Mhm.
and therefore Poland has from the larger countries the worst survival rate from the Holocaust. Most Holocaust survivors were from Hungary, for example, which Hungary, the Holocaust starts 1944,
Mhm.
as opposed to Poland, which starts 1939. So my grandparents were there when the Holocaust starts. My father's parents, my grandfather,
Mhm.
my last name is Levine. That means I'm a Levite as far as the Jewish tradition. And my father's father was from a town north of Warsaw. It was the first reported Nazi atrocities in Jewish media in 1939 was in that town, in a town called Brock. Um, and he saw the Nazis coming because if you know the Nazis, Warsaw fell a couple weeks later. That the attack came from the north. So this is north of Warsaw. So it's really the Jewish community in was about 10-11% of Poland before the Holocaust. Most of them were in the center and on the east side of Poland. Far fewer were on the west. So this is one of the first communities that really had atrocities. This grandfather, this is my father's mother, they lost their families in the Holocaust, and they were lucky. They eventually escaped to the Russian side, and they spent almost 5 years in Siberia, Russia.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
as a little kid, I would see my grandfather's, toes that were all blue from frostbite from those years in Siberia. But
Yeah.
the Stalin threw them into Siberia actually saved their lives, as opposed to their families, which were wiped out. Um, my mother's family, parents, were not so lucky. They spent 6 years with the Nazis. And my mother's father um, lost his first wife and two kids. They were shot in front of his eyes, basically, when the Nazis came. They had a hiding place, and they ran to the hiding place, but they smashed in the door and they closed the hiding place before everyone could get in. And amongst them, my grandfather's first wife and two children. She actually saw them killed through the slats.
Oh my.
Somebody held his mouth. He would hide for a year in a pit, in a pit. Eventually, joining the forest and the partisans and survived the Holocaust. And my mother's mother lost her first husband. She actually had a child from her first husband born in 1942 in Poland. It's given away. It's my mother's half sister, and miraculously, after she survived the Holocaust with many miracles, she would get her back after the Holocaust not easily and marry my grandfather. So I really grew up with four grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. Neither of my parents had any grandparents because they were all murdered in the Holocaust. There were no aunts and uncles, except for one of the relatives, except a couple of siblings. So no aunts, no uncles, no cousins, no grandparents. All of them were killed. If you ever look at my family tree, you'll see, Auschwitz, Belzec, Treblinka, those are death camps where all my great uncles and great grandparents and cousins twice removed were all murdered. But because growing up in a family with grandparents were survivors, some, as you said, never wants to talk. So my grandfathers never spoke about the Holocaust, never spoke about their experiences. I had to find out, through my grandmothers. My grandmothers were very vocal about it, especially one of them. But it certainly impacted the rest of my life. It certainly made me feel like you can't be apathetic. You can't watch things just go on and don't take action. And the other hand, it also kind of empowered me that take advantage of all your opportunities. My grandmother had an amazing thing. She passed away at 105 years old.
Wow.
She had a line, and she said, "Thank God for every day." That was her greatest message. So certainly had a great impact on my life.
Mm. So, I mean, a lot of your family spent time in, Auschwitz, right?
Um, Auschwitz or in the other camps or in the
The
far
concentration camps, I mean, yeah.
yeah
You know,
ghettos as well.
it's just horrible to me
Right.
that what happened. And, you know, uh, I wrote to you about this, but, one of the reasons why, I really appreciate you for, sharing your family story is that all, you say is real. And, you know, a lot of kids in Japan, it's shocking that, they don't even know what Holocaust is.
Right.
Junior high school, even elementary school, I knew about it at least. I mean, even though, I did not know the victims in real because the person I knew was, American Jews, who did not go through, the Holocaust. But it's just, I mean, shocking to me because, I read, my grandmother gave me, a book about Anna Frank.
Wow.
And I grew up with her, her diary and her story all the time. And, it's like, like looking, I have read other people, survivors, biography, it's like just, looking at other people's lives. And, it's very shocking. And at some point, it's very sad. But, there are moments, but yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just
Exactly. So, I actually once gave a lecture being a third generation survivor because, of course, you know, ultimately every single Jew was threatened by Hitler. It's an important lesson about where evil can take a person. I hate to say, I don't know if you got to that later in the program, but we talk about Hamas or
Mm,
some, they have similar views. They're genocidal.
you
And
know,
so like when you see I think it's important. I don't. I believe that most of your audience is from Asia. The Holocaust is important to see what unchecked hatred could do. We're talking about the most evil. You're not just talking about murder, torture, abuse, systematic hunting down of people, destruction of lives with viciousness. It wasn't nationalism. They literally hunted Jews around Europe, rounded them up, murdered them, tortured them, gassed them. destroyed all of their synagogues, and even when the war was ending, you
Mm.
know, Hungarian Jews were murdered as the Nazis were retreating from the Russian front. Significantly, as in June 1944, when Normandy is going on, when they're still gassing Jews to death at over tens of thousands a day. So, the evilness of it's important for people to be cognizant of. It's important to see what hatred could lead to. By the way, I'm sure you know one of the greatest heroes of saving Jews was from Japan, Sugihara, right? Are you aware of that?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, I know of him. Yeah, and yeah.
I had teachers who were saved, many years ago from Sugihara's visas.
That's a great, I think that, I think what he did was very, act of humanity, I have to say, during the difficult time in Japan. But, it's not, for the benefit of him, and it was not for the benefit of the country, but, it was for the reason that he wanted to save people. It
Right.
was
And
very,
he said that. And he said that he put his own life
yeah.
at risk, and his family, as well.
Yeah, and what made, a lot of actually Jewish people, this is something, a little beside, a story, but like a lot of Jewish people tried to find him, later, but
Right.
he resigned from Minister of Foreign Affairs, and it was decades later, and it was the descendants, so it was impossible to trace him. And he never mentioned one word about saving the Jewish people.
Remarkable. They say today his people he saved were many tens of thousands of descendants.
Yeah.
Since some of the people he saved when they got to Kobe, Japan, and eventually to Shanghai when the war started under Japanese,
Mm.
uh, were the biggest teachers of the yeshivas that I studied in, which is just so that influence, continues, onward.
Mm. Yeah. I, this story shocks me just so much. Just, it's very, very, I know of one person though, she's Israeli, but her uncles and aunts were shot in front of her. Yeah, I mean, not in front of her, but her mother, I think. Yeah. And it's very, just shocking to hear all these stories, but I do not understand why the Japanese, education system does not teach the Holocaust. I mean, it's not, a subjective matter, it's a historical matter, you know.
Really.
And you mentioned Hamas. You know, I actually, saw, this it's not a propaganda by Israel, but it's a book that says, 6 million Jews lie. All these things, like, laugh about it. I mean, it's not funny. And also, yeah, I just get furious about it, and get personal at some point because, you know, yeah, it's terrible. And I know some Jewish people, and it's just so terrible to, I would never tell such a thing to people.
Right, right, for sure. Like it just on a personal level, I'm named after my two great grandfathers who were murdered. I'm saying, this is and for again, it's not just a Jewish story. Obviously, the Jews were they were it was the culmination of years of anti-Semitism
Hmm.
and of being the blame for other people's ills.
Hmm.
But if you watch evil and don't stand out against it, if you watch hatred and don't stand out against it, if you believe in lies, right,
Hmm.
some lies and don't call it out. So unfortunately, the worst things can happen. And that's really what happened in the Holocaust. And the the most tragic is there's a lot of bystanders. I guess I mentioned Sugihara. He was a man who was in Lithuania, was in the council
Mhm.
there, and
Yeah.
saved the people. There were many others who could have done what he did, but didn't.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so shocking, that, and in a sense that, I think that, like Council Suihara, I think that, his story should be taught as a part of humanity, you know. And also, it should not be related. This is some kind of the Japanese media trying to do this the whole time. And, I'm sorry that I'm saying this right now, but, you know, like they want to say, like the state media want to say, like, Sugihara, saved Jewish people out of Holocaust because of humanity. But is what Israel's doing is totally like Holocaust, which is not true.
No,
I
it's
mean,
really not true.
it,
That's completely true. That's
no, I don't think, Sugihara would say it in the first place.
one
And I do
million.
not want, the Japanese media dramatizing, the facts and history that way. I mean, it's humiliating in a sense, and it is dishonest, and it is terrible
Yes,
to tell
definitely.
the public.
All the above, plus. All the above, plus. I mean, basically, if you're the Jews, in this case, and again, I'm not even going through the whole history lesson over here of the Jewish people having, been living in Israel. I mean, we're a small nation,
Hmm.
approximately 7.5 million Jews living in modern day Israel, surrounded by hundreds of millions of Arabs and almost 2 billion Muslims. We are not the fact that Israel is even able to be there is theologically a miracle. But to think that we who have been under attack for decades, when we defend ourselves after being attacked or at any level or oppressor is just fake, false, and quite frankly, is just a continuation of anti-Semitism. Um, so it's imagine the Jews defending themselves against the Nazis and being somewhat successful at times, and some people dying in the process.
Hmm.
And you're blamed for defending yourself. The people who attack Israel and continue to attack are largely
Hmm.
jihadists who, if they would ever take over Israel, would slaughter, as you saw even for the few hours on October 7th, would slaughter everyone there. Um, it's
You know what? You know what? I really felt, I was watching, a lot of updates, but, a lot of Mein Kampf book were
yes,
found. I mean, the Japanese media never talk about it. They say like the atrocities of, you know, I'm sorry, idea, but they say like, they call out the Hamas number, and they say it, and they think it's okay to say it. I just cannot believe it. But
right.
what is just it's very shocking because it sounds like when you hear the jihadists, you know mothers, it's not just Hamas, but mothers, the people who believe in Hamas, saying, the justice is like death, the justice is like killing is one more Israelis, and that's glorifying, that's going to glorify our, world. That's all wrong. You know,
Right.
they need,
And basically,
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
but basically, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or the Muslim Brotherhood, these jihadist groups, the Taliban, Al Qaeda, if you're trusting them to self-report,
Mhm.
first of all, they're Nazis. Their Weltanschauung, their worldview is Nazi like. They want supremacy over the world. If you can read their own
Yeah,
hand,
exactly. Yeah.
they have their own Mein Kampfs. They
Mm.
have their own Mein Kampfs. They're just written in Arabic. Many of the Muslim states are scared of these groups very much for that reason themselves.
Mm,
Jordan just, I think today or yesterday, banned the Muslim Brotherhood because they themselves feel themselves that they're in danger. But if you're getting their information, these are hate terrorist groups,
mm,
and you're trusting them to self-report. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And you're legitimizing them, also whatsoever. And if you also get information from Al Jazeera, which by the way is banned in multiple Muslim countries because
mhm.
they themselves are false and stir up, false information and radicalism in people. So again, you're going to be getting fake news. Remember, propaganda. Let's go back to the Holocaust. The Nazis were masters of propaganda. The way they took they convinced the Germans to,
Mm.
to do things and cause the Holocaust is they had Joseph Goebbels,
Yeah, exactly.
Ludwig Reicher, people like this creating the ultimate false information, you know, caricaturing people like the Jews, making them into the devil, creating a whole fake new world into the echo chamber in that. And so if Japanese people are at any level are doing that, they're getting a faulty, dangerous perspective of the Middle East and of the world. And ultimately, these same jihadist groups, I hate to say it, if they had an opening a beachhead in Japan, it would do no different.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly. I mean, this is NH, I'm talking about this NHK program, which is a majorly watched program if you watch TV, And it's so shocking too, and they call out Al Jazeera as well, you know.
right,
And they, air Al Jazeera regularly every day at like around like they used to at least around like 5 a.m. I used to watch a lot of TV programs like, from many countries when I was younger. And, I was up watching at, around 5 o'clock at the time. And I guess that it's available more, but, it's ridiculous I mean, and at the same time, you mentioned, propaganda. You
right,
know, I I am, you know, a lot of people, I have to say the government official of Israel sent me this Palestinian terrorist murders. And I I was they were angry, of course. Their citizens were killed, but at the same time, I saw all these propaganda, go like circulating in Gaza, and I am appalled at people not realizing it, or are they promoting it? I'm just, I start to wonder because, it's very much like Nazi, as you told me. And
right,
I also read a lot of articles and books about, how Nazi, made propaganda,
right,
of how to demonize Jews and
right,
how to characterize Jews and, how to classify Jews and totally eliminate, the
right,
Jewish population. It's a scary part of the history. But, we have to learn some lessons at the same time. It's a historical lesson that we need to have. And at least I believed that until October 7th, I believed that there were some kind of lessons that we learned. But, I really realized, Israel is a very is a country, which has a very, very strong military and, and
right. By
also
necessity,
with human. And I really actually, believe that the casualty rates are much lower than other, than the militaries of other nations. But, but anyway, I'm not talking about the military, but I have to say, but the defense level of Israel is very high, and that happened. And, these people who were in the music festivals, it broke my heart. They were young, and what they did Of course, I do, I don't want to hear because I know what they did. They try to eliminate, like Nazi.
Murder, uh, kidnapping, burning people alive, yeah, exactly.
You know,
That's in the
so,
hours. That's
yeah,
it.
I'm sorry to say all these parts, but like raping women, I know the reason. They did it intentionally, like Nazi did. Nazi, try to just eliminate the, this, population, and like I don't know why they learned that much from Nazi, but they learned well, I guess,
Oh,
from from Nazi. And I was talking with Dr. Annette Wilf,
right.
over how much they were not penalized after World War II, you know, and at the same time they're really using now like Soviet Union era, propaganda.
Well, a lot of the Palestinian propaganda came from Stalin and Khrushchev as well. It was, I mean, the Soviets. Soviets is a totally different story. They started what's called the Protocols of Zion of the Elder,
Yeah.
which with Mein Kampf and the number, was the most, was spread out conspiracy anti-Semitic book.
Mm,
The Soviets, of course, would make the Palestinian flag
mm,
and kind of create this image and vilify, Israel for their own reasons, by the way, for decades, and they did take a lot of their material and continue to do it. By the way, it's not like it's not an old thing.
mm. Yeah, it's very, very
These are
shocking.
smart people, which is why it's surprising
Hmm.
that an educated, intelligent country like Japan
Hmm.
uh, are buying it, hook and sinker, like just first of all being ill-educated. Let's
Mm.
take to India. India is today extraordinarily pro-Israel as a country, and a lot of the media is that way. Why is that? Because they experience jihadism in the north with
Oh yeah, right,
and
exactly.
so, right, and so near the Kashmir area, the people that are largely fighting are jihadi type groups. And so India, for example, is aware that you can't look at people who are trying to kill you or destroy you. And in India is a lot less vulnerable. It's over 1 billion people.
Mhm.
The fighting is in one area. They don't have multiple countries attacking them at
Mhm.
once. They're not the focus of Shia and Sunni, terrorist groups, but yet they understand that this is something that's not negotiable, and you can portray the oppressors as oppressed, but it's a lie. It's false. It's fake and dangerous.
Yeah, I realize that, what, I have a lot of more and more Indian listeners, and I was wondering about it. And one day, one of my guests told me that, India is one of the countries that are very, friendly to Israeli people. And, his relatives were married into like Indian families. And yeah, I realized that, like obviously, yeah, as you told me, India is, fighting against jihadism, but, beyond that, India has a very, I think, unique culture in a sense, that, like are very, I guess, open to, and moderate to, it's very different from, the neighboring nations in a sense, which,
Right.
but I really, yeah, I have heard some like Jewish people, or Jewish, people with Jewish faith living there as well, like, uh, yeah,
Which, by the way, there was a terrorist attack in Bombay and Mumbai. I don't know, was it over 10 years ago? They attacked, there was something called Chabad. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chabad movement is.
yeah.
Chabad is it's a Hasidic sect amongst Jews, which they're an international movement. So they have centers around the world for Jews that are So in Mumbai, they had a Jewish thing which was attacked by jihadi terrorists, and it was taken over and killed. At maybe it's about 10, 12 years ago. I forget exactly in India, a very small community,
Mm.
and they attacked other people that day, not just the Jewish center as well. These terrorists,
Yeah, it's very, yeah, it's like comparing like comparing Japan and India. Japan is also a Buddhist country as well. And, in a sense that, I think that it's not about the Japanese people, but they need to be informed appropriately. And, obviously we're not attacking, anyone, but, we need to, I think that really they need to understand,
right?
and be informed what is happening, why October 7th matters. Because October 7th really mattered to me. And, before, just 1 month before that, Lazzarini, like our office chief, he came to Japan and said, we are going to have an operating office. And, we're going to have like Aura office, real like operating in East Asia. That was not needed, obviously. And, I mean, like Aura is the last thing on the planet that we I want. It's not about Palestinian people, but they also are the cash machine for Hamas, the terrorists. And
Right.
and I just am shocked that, Japanese government is funding them. And, as to save Palestinian people because like according to UN Watch, only 14% of UNRWA, like supply is supporting the Palestinian in Gaza, for example. I mean, only 14%. And how come they are saying that, we're the major part of,
Right. If you scratch beneath the surface, they're supporting terrorism. That's
yes.
essentially what happened. There are multiple other employees. They certainly watch them build tunnels and a terrorist infrastructure, put them under their schools, etc. So they're aiding and abetting and funding terrorism.
And it's not just that. I've told this again, but 10 years ago, a person, it's not an Israeli, but there was a person from the United States Army. He was complaining about the United Nations, and I asked him, why, and then he said like, well, look at this. And that was Ura, this teacher that was also Palestinian. And, by the way, almost all of like the teachers from Ura are Palestinians. And they are teaching and, kids are singing like, we have to burn Jews. I mean, what kind of sing is that?
Right. That's just pretty crazy.
I mean, okay, it's not funny, even though I'm just, I just kind of laugh. But now, like, it was not funny, and I cannot accept that kind of singing in Japan. And I'm just shocked that there are lawmakers, who mock them.
Right. Right. No, for
So
sure.
it's,
You tell me if I'm wrong. Historically, for many years, Japan was dependent upon the Middle East's oil. Is that correct?
yeah, exactly.
A lot of it was kind of like, because they were dependent on oil,
Hmm.
they were being nice to regimes and countries that would have supported such things.
Mm.
Irrespective of the righteousness of it, it's kind of a sell-off. We need your oil. We'll help you out or close our eyes to other things because we need the oil. Unfortunately, that's not just Japan. Many countries have had that reality is that these the countries that have oil they were dependent upon, and so okay, we don't fully agree, but we won't give a full story and etc.
But you know what? It's like a time bomb almost. Because, at the same time, that means, in a sense, deceiving, the United States, which is supporting the Jewish state, basically.
Right.
And also at the same time, Japan now has a problem, similar problem. We're going to close eyes, most of the problems with China. And we have now a China, problem with China, obviously.
Right.
It's not just North Korea. North Korea is funded by, China. Taiwan is all, just they for years now, Chinese military surround, Taiwan and do the military drills. They lock the island. And it's just unbelievable, and the Japanese corporations have invested to China for years. And, we are going to have the similar problem with the Middle East as well if we keep
Potential,
doing
that's
that.
for sure. It goes back to the same thing. If you ignore evil, if you just watch it grow, it will come back to bite you. And if you tell your people, don't, this is not so bad, don't worry about it, you know, ultimately, actually, it's crazy to me,
Mhm.
is the supporters of Hamas, Hezbollah in Europe, for example, and some of America, the far left, they would never, if they would be in these countries,
Mhm.
they would be the first victims.
I know.
They're so living in la la land.
Mhm.
There's no population of that in Houthis part of the world or in Gaza. They would be the first people thrown off roofs, and that they're imagining that these are their friends, and they're not. And
Yeah.
so, ultimately, if jihadi groups would take over, I'm not saying what happened, but Amsterdam or Paris,
Oh
they're
yeah,
the
that's
ones that would
horrible.
they're the ones, and yet they're attacking the people who are standing up to them.
Mhm.
So it's more than quite unfortunate. It's crazy and scary.
It is scary. And you know, one thing, before October 7th, I was just looking at, one diplomat, and I guess he was in New York area. He was talking about anti-Semitism before October 7th, rising. And, I was wondering what he meant by really rising anti-Semitism. But, after watching all these protests, that's not humane protests at
No,
all.
no. I mean, and
No.
many of them are not from, they're immigrants. I mean, and they took these viewpoints. Not all of them, certainly, but they're anti-American, they're
Mhm.
anti-West, and they're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I mean, they're
And I,
anti-West, anti-American, anti-democratic.
right, yeah, absolutely.
And, I realized that, what he was saying is true, which is, I was thinking about this, over and over, and, I reached conclusion that this, is a part of the immigration program. The problem that the United States and the West, introduced. And as a result, what happened is the protest that's happening right now. And one thing that, well, you're a lawyer as well. I
Right.
just, one thing that, I was interested in was that, the students, the protests, majorly related to funding Hamas were deported, face deportation right now. But I guess that, the United States government, in my opinion, has deported people if they're against something, not just some, against the law, I mean, the rules of the visa. If they violate something like, like terrorism act, which is just which is a scary, like it's just beyond my head.
People got visas, come into this country to be educated,
Hmm.
and use those visas or use to terrorize, to damage. These are vandals. I mean, they went into university campuses, smashed things up, damaged them, threatened students. It's not a First Amendment thing. You can't go into into a place and start screaming, "I'll kill you," or take over halls, or intimidate students and say that that's a free speech thing. That's called hatred and intimidation and vandalism, and that's what many of these students were doing. Many of them were not American citizens coming here. Some of them clearly, by the way, and it's going to come out more and more in the next few months,
Mm.
were sent by terrorist organizations, or connected to them. Some of the ringleaders, not all, but some of them.
Yeah, and also, like I guess.
Qatar, Qatar is a major supporter of universities in America. There's a reason Qatar, which also hosts Al Jazeera in its country, and had what to do with Hamas and these places, gives money to universities. It's called, they want to be in their sphere of influence.
It's interesting that they do that, really, though. I
They're
mean, yeah, go ahead,
a
please.
small ideological country, and they throw around money, and
Mm.
they dance with a lot of um, a lot of terrorist groups as well. Not the whole thing, but they dance. They have no problem dancing with terrorism, and with a Wahhabi view of the world. And remember, even Qatar, at one point, how it was broken away from the. It's amazing to say Saudi Arabia is today more moderate than some of these countries, and United Arab Emirates. All those countries, some of them are shifted more to the west, shifted more to semi,
Mm.
with the Abraham Accords, in the
Mm.
case of some of those countries, you know, working, to moderate the views of anti-West, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israel. In contrast, far from that, and on the contrary, they propagate again in different ways, whether it's in universities, whether it's through Al Jazeera, the complete opposite message.
Like you mentioned, the ideology of Qatar, you know,
Right.
like after 2022, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, Prime Minister Kishida decided to purchase LNG gas from Qatar. Like, oh my goodness. It was like, oh my goodness. Like because Canada was trying to offer that at the same time. And I did not understand why he made that decision. And also, like at that, around that time, the media started to advertise, Qatar, like, like there's no water bills, gas bills, it's a free, country.
Right. It goes hand in hand. Basically, there's no question if you make a deal with countries like that, they're gonna say you have to give us good press, right? You have to give us good whatever. You have to say these type of things, irrespective of their other actions. Um, China would work the same way to an extent. You can't do business and then say, like the fact that you oppress the Uyghurs or this people or that people. You have to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. It's, and I have a terrible impression on Qatar. You know, the Japanese, it was during like the World Cup, I guess. I guess soccer like chief like, player, made a protest against the government, the Iranian. I think again, for the sake of uh Mahamini, the Iranian girl who was murdered. And
Right.
and the Japanese media didn't talk about it. I mean,
On their
it's
head.
it did talk about it, but it did not exactly talk about it. Just it just
Exactly.
said a little fact, and that was it. But it's a human rights issue. Like the soccer players could face not just deportation from Qatar, but they could face the death penalty, of course, in Iran.
Well, right, right. The difference that's in Iran and Qatar,
Mm.
between two countries is Qatar is much more, um, they're much like a snake. They pretend one way, they act another way, they get the money under the table. Iran is an open supporter of terrorism. And that's why, Iran kind of, they are out in the open. They support. Hamas, they support Hezbollah, they support the Houthis, they abuse their people in public. If there would ever be an open election in Iran, this radical Islamic fundamentalist oppressive government would be voted out. But they'll never let that happen. In fact, they abuse their own people as well, and they abuse
Exactly.
our people in that country as well. And they are again, they have radical views. They if they would ever get a nuclear weapon, they would use it. It means most people have some self care, but if you believe you're gonna get go to heaven, have 70 virgins for killing millions of people, you'll
Mhm.
be much more likely to do it as you mentioned, with mothers from Hezbollah or
Mhm.
Hamas saying, "I want to give my kid to be be a shihad, a martyr, for Allah." That type of view on a national government like Iran, which again which is has a powerful molecule and a lot of oil, and supports terror proxies around the world. So they're open about it. Qatar, however you pronounce it, is they're much more undercover. They don't have the population or the military to do what Iran does. But the reason Iran is always in the news and not Qatar is because Iran is open about it. I mean, you imagine they shot hundreds of missiles at Israel this year, hundreds of missiles over different, over countries. Imagine China shooting 400 missiles at Japan. That's what Iran has no problem doing, openly supporting all kinds of terrorist groups and terror attacks around the world against different countries. And those attacks, they had a supposedly not say a plot to kill President Trump himself. That's how crazy Iran could be.
Yeah. You know, like when I saw October 7th, you mentioned, hundreds of missiles, That's something that I know of course, for years, who starts the war, not Israel, obviously, all the time. But, it's always Israel somehow to be blamed by the media. But, uh, Japan cannot retain that level of, military deterrence. And I need probably the Japanese people need to realize it. And uh I know that, peace is important. Like shalom, it's it's peace.
Well,
And it's not I mean, Israeli people have always wanted peace, like
yep.
all people. But it's not always the case that, things go as we want. And, I do not think that, the Japanese people can say, oh, there's peace by looking away things, what's happening around the world, for decades, from which means 80 years. And, um, and, it just said, yeah, like I just, well, people may want to believe, the Japanese may want to believe that, they have retained the peaceful time. But, just, a few years ago, there were like about 5 missiles fired from China against Japan.
Right.
And, we're screaming about it. You know, so like, compare that to hundreds of missiles actually directed at.
At civilian areas.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's, those missiles are directed at civilian areas and they're making people scared. And,
And they're endangering them. If those missiles are hit,
exactly. Yeah,
10,
endangering lives. Yeah.
right?
And,
Uh,
yeah, and in Japan, there's almost no shelters. I mean, how come, they protect their lives, really? And the Japanese governments would say, well, there's like good, air defense system that we have, maybe we can shut down like one, two, three, how many? You know, it starts to, we start to count like how many missiles and, we can just shut down and all these things. I mean, we cannot just criticize a country that is defending itself. and
Oh,
also at the
be supportive of it, not criticism. It should be supportive of people defending themselves.
exactly. I mean, we are supposed to support people who are who became the victim of October 7th, and at the same time, we have to support the victim nation. I mean,
Right. So it's also it, it, a country. It's not just defending. You mentioned shalom, which is peace. Jews, we finish our daily prayer 3 times a day with the prayer for peace. We finish our grace for meals after we break bread. We finish with prayer for peace. We in a prayer called Kaj, with prayer for peace.
mhm.
Sometimes peace has to be through strength because otherwise there's no peace. I meant we started in the beginning about my grandparents being survivors. They wanted peace. To the extent they could have resisted the Nazis, they would have been great, but they had no option. Right? They had no defense mechanisms. They were surrounded by at the time the most powerful military in the world. You know, they were little children, so they were killed. What would you expect Israel to do the same thing? They should just be lambs to the fire over there. In the Holocaust, there were many Jews who resisted both physically and spiritually, but were greatly outnumbered. Today, there's a book called People Like Dead Jews. That when you're dead in the Holocaust, they can, oh, we feel so bad, but to defend yourself, there's no tolerance and there's no understanding of it. The overwhelming majority of Jews and Israelis, if they have the option of a true peace, a long, real peace, of course they would take it. But when people with ideologies, with Weltanschauungs, with worldviews, which there is no possibility of peace. Right? So, there was never an opportunity to make peace with a person like Hitler, because you could read Mein Kampf and you can understand his mind was for one thing and one thing only, one world dominance. And he wanted, the racial superiority of the Aryan nation. You can't make peace with such people. The only way you can do is defend yourself and hopefully a different generation with new education. You mentioned UNRWA with the schools to re-educate people that really want peace, not just a deceiving way to we'll get our way and we'll kill you. Right? We'll bug you, we'll rape you, we'll kill you. That's not the goal over here. So it's important for Japanese people to understand, and anyone listening to this, is number one is, I'm a rabbi. So, when I look at the Jewish people, whether it's before the Holocaust, after the Holocaust, before October 7th, after, there's a tremendous God plan for the Jewish people. That's why we're here. That's how we survived, and that's how we rebuilt. And ultimately, those who help us get helped. Those who curse us, they ultimately fail. And I say that not lightly. But on top of that, if you are thrown off your moral calibration, if a person thinks that if I close my eyes to people suffering there, nothing will happen to me. Well, as you mentioned, Hannah, you have a very powerful and belligerent country called China, not too far away from you. And by the way, Russia, Putin himself, he's focusing on the West near Ukraine, but he can easily turn around the other way and he'd be right next to Japan, right? You can't just imagine if I let evil fester somewhere else, it won't affect me, because what happens is China watches Russia attack Ukraine and says, why not attack Taiwan? This country attacks over here at terrorism and it works, so I'll attack you terrorism also. Once you allow hatred, evil, terrorism, well, in this case, it's jihadism, which is one of the most, there's all around conflicts from these people. There are many, many peaceful Muslims, but this jihadi group is not a small group, and they use every means. You mentioned October 7th, Hannah. I mean, my father-in-law was at the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. Same ideology as 9/11 in America. So you imagine it will never hit Japan. That there could be a 9/11 in Japan tomorrow for such people, right? And there could be enough. So watching things happen, it doesn't affect me, or I'll give you a fake story, or because I want oil, or whatever reason, I want Qatar's gas, I'll close my eyes and make pretend like they're not involved in all kinds of false fake
Mm.
things. Ultimately, you lose. Ultimately, you endanger yourself, and truth and goodness um, becomes less common in that case.
Yes, I believe in faith. And I actually, agree with you. And, Putin actually, mentioned something like this. There were, he asked North Korea to, deploy their military in Ukraine. That was a terrible thing to me.
Right.
Not just because North Koreans went there, you know, but Putin, the second thought, this is something I have had since 2002, is that Putin might give the technology of trajectory of the missile to North Korea, which is terrible,
Well,
And that
that's how they got the weapons in the first place is from Russia and China. I'm saying they didn't make it themselves. They got the technology from Russia and China.
yeah. And you mentioned also Putin. Like personally, I have hated Putin since 2006, especially. But before that, I hated Putin in Russia. But anyway, he murdered one journalist. Obviously, she was outspoken critic of Putin, and of
Right.
course she was killed in
And
Russia.
all kinds of people. I mean, he was in the Russian Secret Service. That the Russian Secret Service, really a history, the NKVD, which was in the early communist days, all the way through. There are plenty of innocent people who spoke out, ended up in the gulags. That has not totally disappeared. Obviously, it's not the same thing today. So they poison you in somewhere, you disappear. I mean,
Yeah,
just
Navalny, you know.
exactly pick the words out of my mouth.
Mm.
Yeah,
And people support Ukraine. Japanese overly majority of Japanese people support Ukraine.
right.
But it's because well, it's not well before that, a lot I guess like most of the media kind of did not criticize Putin so much. But, and also like I guess like Akita Prefecture gave a dog to him. Like the dog breeder got angry, after 2022, and he said like I should not have given that dog. But if they understand that, I do not understand why there are some criticisms against Israel. you know, it's
Again, I think I'm going to just be honest. I think a lot of it has to do with
mm,
just the desire to get the Middle East oil and not to entangle themselves. Just like it's just more convenient. There are a lot of countries you have to do business with, and it's not. We don't want to cause it rattle a cage, and it's so you'll take a narrative, a story which doesn't affect you, and it's easy to do this way. That's not right, and
exactly.
it's not right, and it's not true, and
Mhm.
it's not. I just I use LinkedIn a little bit to just to share. Sometimes I'll share my story, sometimes I'll share ideas, and Substack as well. And just yesterday, I posted a picture of Jews in Vienna cleaning the floors in 1938 when the Nazis took over Austria in 1938. Well, basically, Austria, Czechoslovakia were given over, especially Czechoslovakia by the West to appease the Nazis.
Mhm.
And I put a quote from a famous Israeli professor, a historian of the Holocaust, about don't be a perpetrator, don't be a victim in between to the extent you can resist, and don't be a bystander. I think many of the Japanese, and obviously you know a lot better than I would, they're not looking to be perpetrators. They're just bystanders, and it's convenient.
Mhm.
This is a convenient story for them that Israel is this military, but it's not real, right? If you can't defend yourself, then ultimately, whether you're Ukraine or Japan, you're going to have the same problem.
Well, see, I believe that it's the interests of not the majority, but a few that and that control the media in a sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's in the hands of a few, which is why, by the way, in today's world, podcasters like yourself, influencers, you make a difference. The reason I said yes to your kind offer to share, most of your audience is people that obviously I'll never know or meet, but you're influencing many thousands of people who will influence even more people.
Mm,
And a little truth takes away a lot of darkness. A
mm,
little, opening your eyes, you see the world differently. This Socrates, the Greek philosopher, has a couple times in his works, he talks about the person in the cave. You're familiar with that? He says, imagine a boy is born in a cave, and all around you is you see your surroundings. You never walk out of the cave. You don't see the sun. You don't see trees.
mm.
You what happens is you believe that the cave is the ultimate truth.
Oh,
And so
yes.
and so one day you leave the cave, you see a whole new world. So if your media is for whatever reason presenting a false narrative, you're in a cave. You're not seeing the light. And not only that, it's not healthy. It's not in people's interest to let evil people do evil things. It just spreads, right? It's like if you let bullies in one school, they'll come to your school also. Right? If bullyism becomes a reality, it just spreads.
Mhm.
Besides the moral imperative to stand up for the truth.
Yeah. I guess that, one thing, bullying, this is anti-Semitism. Oh, and also
Yeah,
discrimination included. And I guess that, it's something that, I guess that Japanese people have to overcome as well. Um, it's not all and the entire people, majority of people are very nice, but in some cases there are very, very serious bullying. And it's we cannot just not see, we need to see it and
right,
we need to face it as well. And you by the way, you are a rabbi and
right,
you sent me, URL of Torah education.
right. Think Torah. ThinkTorah.org.
I, you know, I'm not Jewish, but I was overwhelmingly influenced by Christianity, and in a sense, I read Bible every day right now. So, um, I hope that you could explain your dedication to like your faith or activity.
Right. So, Judaism, obviously, Christianity, all early Christians were Jews. And of course, Islam itself, by the way, Muhammad took a lot of the Torah and put it into the Quran. He worked with Jews. That's the Quran itself. Judaism has a moral code for the world, for both for Jew and Gentile.
Mhm.
And the highest principle of Judaism is study. So the Torah is literally the Torah literally means instructions. So when you come to a person of Jewish faith, a religious person, so first is you believe in God, and if
Mhm.
God puts you in the world, He just put you in the world with no direction. Like I told someone recently, you can't get in a car and drive and not know where you're going. You have to have a place you're going to. You gotta know, you need to have a path. And
Mhm.
the Torah is a path. Now, the Torah is specific for the Jews. It's interesting. Judaism is probably the major religions, which if you actually Judaism always believes that there are more than one path for the world to come for heaven, however you want to call it. We don't proselytize. We don't convert people because we believe you could be a non-Jew and be a righteous person and get the world to come. Whereas technically, many sects of Christianity, Islam do not have that viewpoint. And that's why they try to convert you because if you don't believe, you're going to Hell. So what we look to do, first of all, is to study God's Torah, um, to emulate God. What does that mean? To be kind, to be caring, to be divine. That we're in this world, in this physical, mundane world, to enjoy the world, to partake of it. But ultimately, this world is only a corridor for an eternal world. As you know, the concept, if you're a Christian or learning Christianity, Messiah is a Jewish idea, right? Messiah means the world itself has a purpose. It means the world also, it's not driving to nowhere. You, Hannah, and I have a purpose, and everybody has a purpose, and we have to know what our purpose is. But the world has a purpose. The world has a lot of perfection. So a lot of Judaism is, there's the Ten Commandments, which are basic principles,
Mhm.
five between man and God, and five between man and man. For example, believe in one God, okay? Don't worship multiple gods. Uh, Keep the Sabbath, honor your parents, but also don't steal, don't covet. Uh, uh, things of don't murder, things of that sort. So a lot of our passion we study, we pray 3 times a day. I'm the head of a Jewish school. Religious Jews certainly will not send their kids to public school. Why? If Judaism is your life, you don't want people who don't have your values or your ideas. So if people don't believe in marriage, and you believe in marriage, we believe in marriage, right? We try to marry young and build families. So if somebody believes marriage is bad, why would I want them educating my child? Number two is we have, books of scripture, Talmud, Zohar. We have all kinds of works that we want our children to learn, which, so we focus on education, on family.
Mhm.
One of the highest things is charity, giving. You live not just for yourself, you live for the community. All these are values which we live and we try to teach our children and our future generations. We just had Passover, the Pesach.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, so one of the
That's,
major,
yeah.
uh,
How was your Passover? They asked that.
amazing. So, but we don't eat any bread items, no cookies, no cakes, no bread over Passover. We have what's called matzah. Um, but really Passover, we tell the story of our exodus, we left Egypt, and not just a history story. I have a history background. I write history on history. It's about giving over the next generation, inspiring the next generation. Now, I'll tell you something interesting about Judaism. Judaism, the highest level of faith is knowledge and includes questions and answers. The whole Seder, which is the Passover Seder, is all questions and answers. You ask a question, we answer it. The Talmud, it's question answer. It's inquisitive, right? You're supposed to not just take, we're not blind faith people. We're the highest thing is knowledge. You want to know our story? Ask, right? You want to understand something? Ask the question. It's not a fear of questions or knowledge. On the contrary, the most passionate Jews are the most educated Jews. Education, I walk around as a religious Jew. I was in an Ivy League college. It was not a university. I'm always having, in German, Immanuel Kant called it a culture a clash of cultures. We're not a majority, we're a minority. But we are strong beliefs because we're confident in our faith and in ourselves as well. And so that comes from knowledge. And we have, again, the Torah is the basis of everything. And ultimately, while there are bad apples amongst the Jews, I always say Judaism in my mind is perfect. Jews are not. Jews are human beings, and humans, some are better and some are worse. But the aspiration of the Torah is to be with a divine life. And that's what I try to do for myself, for my children, the school I'm involved with. That's our goal, is to be good people, kind people, caring people, holiness, divine at the same time.
See, holiness. That's very, I think that unique to the religions, I have to say. And, I do not want to humiliate religions this way, but, in terms of the Japanese, like the majority of, I guess that the people are Buddhist, and Buddhist, is something about method. And also at the same time, if they do something bad, their next generation, they get punishment and they become some low level thing. You know, at the
Right.
highest level, we don't know. But it's something that um it's something called it's something that the person, it's not the person exactly anymore, but the being that knows the most, you know but have learned all the lessons and knows have knowledge extensively that people cannot understand ultimately. And it's, there are like classes beyond people at the same time. So it's very different from, Christianity or, Judaism. But, I think that, in a sense, it's important for people to understand, you know, the values. It's a means to understand people's values. So I don't think that, people should say, well, we don't care about the religions. We do care about the religions ultimately. And, I think that we should try to understand, how people think and also what people value. I mean, which is very important. So believe that, if people understand English, I mean, your website is in English. So,
Right. Right. If you want to get, if anyone to go, a lot of actually, some of the many of the lectures are on Talmud, which is going to be Hebrew and ancient Aramaic, which
Mhm.
obviously would not be for, but so it's the Jewish history section in particular. The person wants to get an understanding of who the Jewish people were, our experience. Um, you know, uh, I actually have about 40 hours from the fall of Jerusalem to the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era, all the way to the reconquering of Jerusalem in 1967. It would probably, it's again, think Torah, THINKTORAH, that or thinking in Torah or think about Torah and look at the Jewish history series will probably be a great education about the Jewish people. And if you understand the history of the Jewish people, you understand why, people in Israel today are not going to let themselves be killed. Uh, you
Oh,
know,
yes, exactly. Yeah. Pogrom, all these, I have to say, the sacrifices, ultimate sacrifices
right.
Jewish people have made. Yeah.
And again, I think, for you're doing great work for Japanese, people like yourself, if I mentioned Judaism, ask questions, dig a little deeper, ask the questions, don't just hear one story, try to understand the fullness of a situation. And I think and look who's funding what and why certain things are happening. Why would you trust a terrorist organization to report who's read Hamas's own words, what their worldview is, right? Don't take them, read their Mein Kampf, right? And
Yeah.
read it, see what they have to say. See if this is the group you want to associate with and be successful, or take their numbers. Look into the facts of Israel does have a superior air force. If they wanted to, they could have sent no soldiers into Gaza to bomb the thing to bits, not have one flight, but they put all tens of thousands of soldiers who left their family, who left their jobs, who many of them died or maimed or wounded, just so they don't kill innocent people. And to believe all of these fake stories, about propagated by a Nazi group, that all you have to do is do real research and real questions and answers. And in general in life, it's a healthy thing, which is why again I'm extremely pleased that you invited me to come today because you're giving opportunities for people to think.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that you told me a lot of really, direct opinions, which is very important because, some people, try to avoid, like direct opinions. But it's very important, I really believe that,
Right.
and, especially for young generations, I think that, Japanese people need to learn to how to say, and it's important you know how it really matters. So I believe that I guess that it's not just I guess it's not just closed society that Japan is anymore. We need to learn outside world, and I guess that the Jewish world is one of the world that we need to understand. And also one of the things that we need to understand is how much sacrifices that the Jewish people have made, not just Holocaust, but throughout history for
Right.
thousands of years, you know.
Absolutely. And, yeah. And again, we live in a world with the media where a lot of the values today
Mm.
are are dependent on some people, a few people giving their what they think is right and truth, and it just changes over morality and values. We've been around for almost 4,000 years. You
Mm.
know, the same Talmud and Torah that I'm living and studying is what my ancestors did 2,000 years ago in Israel, and and before. So there's we learn about Judaism, you're able to see a people who adapt to the times but don't change the core values in their faith. That's important for everybody. There's something to be gained by learning about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess it's about time. And I guess you have another job to do.
Yes,
And
I
it's
have a
probably
page I can do.
so
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it
thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a nice day.
too. And I know your mother's not feeling well. You should see her in good health, God willing.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bye. I truly appreciate Rabbi for taking this time. And at the same time, it was an honor. And also, he discussed a lot of issues with me without politics, like as humans, at human level, I have to say. And um, I I am different from him, of course. I mean, every a person is different at the same time, even though people belong to the same religion, of course. And at the same time, um, I'm not Jewish, but um, at human level, he discussed a lot of things with me. And also, I truly appreciate sharing his family's background. And I hope the listeners, like you, please do not humiliate uh, him uh, or his background. I mean, it's inhumane to do it, and it's very, very disgraceful at the same time while he is discussing issues on uh, this podcast seriously. So I hope that you treat us humanely at humane level because we are not attacking anyone. We are trying to discuss honestly what the problem is without politics. Okay? This is at human level. And please think of your future or your children or yourself on what you need to do for the future because it is not about what we say, but there is a reality coming with it. So, anyway, I hope that you had a great time listening to this podcast. And also, there will be Colonel Ransomir. Again, I asked him to discuss the situation in Gaza and a few questions. And there will be more guests. And I have been having a very hard time making my own podcast. I mean, my podcast alone because of my family situation, but I hope to make more podcasts. So please stay updated. Please listen to my podcast. Please rate it and also please download it. Okay, so I hope you have a good day, good evening. Well, to the Japanese people, I guess it's going to be good morning. Okay, to me, good night.